Hey, Gelie, listen. We're talking about the networking event, and I didn't ask you about the admission, by the way.
It's free.
See, there's more good news
Yeah.
every time I ask you a question. I love that. That's terrific. And I will see you there because AZTV is going to be there.
That's great.
But people want to know. They want to know, okay, well, listen, if I'm going to make some kind of a commitment to this Gelie lady that I'm meeting perhaps for the first time.
Right.
And she's this hot networking star. I want to know more about her. And it's worth part 2
All right.
of the Gelie Ackenblitz story. Where did it all begin?
Well, in 1989, my family and I was about 8 years old back then. We immigrated from the former Soviet Union.
Where?
From
What part?
Moldova, Chisinau. And we left there and, in hopes for a better future. And so, but it was one of those things where when we were leaving, we didn't even quite know where we were going to land, potentially in Israel, potentially in the United States.
And would they let you go? I mean, not everybody was allowed out of the Soviet Union.
Absolutely not. I believe this was the third time that my family actually tried to leave, and the first 2 times they were denied, and then the third time they actually let the family go through. But it was one of those things where I think once they let you go through, you had just a very limited amount of time to pack up and get out. So we did. And so once you leave the Soviet Union, we landed in Austria. That was, I think that's just how they had it planned. And once we got there, we stayed in this communal hotel type of a setting, and once you're there, you kind of have to go through the American embassy there, and there's a series of questions and interviews. Are you really a refugee? Why did you leave? You kind of have to prove that.
Do you remember these? Do you remember 8 years old?
I remember it from an 8-year-old's perspective. I mean, I obviously don't remember everything, all the details of what my parents had to go through, but I remember enough. I remember, you're uprooting your entire life and moving. And so Austria was actually a lot of fun for me also, living in foreign countries. But we stayed there for 2 weeks. We were very lucky because not as many people get to move that quickly. So we got to move quickly, and so we stayed there for 2 weeks, and then the next place we landed was in Italy. So once in Italy, I don't know why, once again, I don't actually recall, but for some reason we lived in somebody's beach house on the beach. Not going to complain about that.
I was going to say, you could have done worse.
Yeah, could have done worse.
The refugee family moves into the beach house.
I know, right?
And spends how much time?
But they didn't have a TV there. I was very upset. But
Poor baby.
We stayed there about 2 months, and same process, right, where you had to go to the American embassy and we had to interviews and whatnot, and there's this gathering place where all the refugees would gather a certain part of the week in a daytime, and somebody would come from the embassy, and if they call out your name, then you get to move through. If they don't call out your name, you don't.
Gathering from all different parts of the world? All different nationalities in this gathering place?
I believe these were the Russian refugees. Right. And so after our interview, my family was too nervous to go that they sent my uncle, and he came back, and they called her name.
Wow.
So.
Wow. Do you remember the family mood at that time? Because, and you had the hopes and the wishes and the dreams and the aspirations, but all of these blockades going on through the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And finally the family name is called. Do you remember the mood?
Well, I do. I remember everybody being very, very nervous, and we were all sitting in this little cafe waiting for him to come back. And then the thing is, he came back and said, we're going to Arizona. Well, first he said, we're going to the desert. And everyone's like, what? Do you mean Israel? What do you mean desert? I mean, everybody was actually very confused. I think my grandma almost had a heart attack. It wasn't funny.
Right. Saudi Arabia. That's a lovely place to go.
Exactly. But then he says Arizona, and no one's heard of Arizona in Russia. I mean, we've heard, New York, Los Angeles, Bryant Beach, but Arizona, Phoenix, no one's heard of it. So the reason we actually we were chosen to go to Arizona is because we didn't have any family in the United States. So we didn't ask for any specific state.
Sure.
And right at that moment, the Jewish community here, I think it was the Jewish Federation, they'd opened up a fund to sponsor 50 Russian Jewish refugees to come to Phoenix, and we happened to be the very first family that was Russian refugee in Phoenix, and that was about 22 years ago.
A lot of lucky cards were drawn by your family, and I hope that they didn't regret the choice of Arizona.
No, we're still here. We love it.
And you're networking all over the place.
Absolutely.
And when you first got here, though, your first reaction was, what have we done? Let's go back to Russia, or what?
No, well, mine wasn't. I think it was a big shock for my family. I mean, just first, the culture is very different, obviously, the American culture, the Russian culture, but also the weather, the climate
Yes.
was a little bit different. My mom was pregnant at the time. It was very hot for her. I mean, there was just all sorts of changes that we had to go through. But me being young, I acclimated much quicker.
Right, and then you had to learn to say, but the heat is very dry in Russian.
Yes.
And I'm so delighted that the whole family made it. We're better for you being here.
Oh, thank you.
And so is the networking community. Remind them once again where to go.
Monday, August 29th, 6 to 9 p.m., Talking Stick Resort in the ballroom. And it's free.
Спасибо, до свидания.
Спасибо.
And that's it for me. My entire Russian vocabulary has been used up.